Hello YouTube. So here it is, the promised video on some WWE stuff, since we've got a new product that's going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks, and then also an announcement for another one. So let's get into it. One of the things I promise is that on the channel, even if I'm not collecting them necessarily, although I do collect a couple of WWE cards here and there, I still want to talk about it because wrestling cards in general doesn't have that many releases that you want to kind of limit yourself a little bit. That's one of my criticisms of a couple of other ones in the space that kind of just focus on WWE only and ignore AEW. And in this case, I don't want to do the opposite. So we're going to cover this one here. First off, let's start off with 2025 Topps Chrome Cactus Jack, because that's the one that I'm showing a post here from Instagram that was a couple of weeks ago. But obviously we've got the checklist at this point, so I want to go over a little bit about the checklist. I'm not going to go too far into depth, but in the description I will include a link to it so that you can check out the checklist for yourself and then also download it. They've got an Excel version of it so that you can use that to manipulate it and basically put together whatever kind of checklist you want. Check out if your favorites are in there and whatever you're going to be chasing after, so you'll have a chance to look at that. I'm starting here because I want to showcase a couple of the cards again in case you haven't looked at them in a little bit. One of the things I'll say is it is a chromium set. In that sense, it's good. One of the things that I'll touch on that I have seen in a few videos that have talked about this is that I do think the set will do well. Now, I'm going to put well in quotation marks here because I think that the boxes themselves, honestly, I think they're too expensive, but the secondary market is going to push it further. The pre-order was already $400, and then the secondary market will push it past that. You don't have a guaranteed autograph per box, so as far as opening individual boxes, I think it's going to be a bit hit or miss. However, I think part of them being so expensive out of the block and there being such a big gap in real releases between the first Topps Chrome and then this Cactus Jack one being technically the next real release. I'm not counting the Cactus Jack WrestleMania, and I'm not counting Sapphire. We're talking about the next real release is going to make these a lot more popular. And it is going to make it so that people that are chasing after certain things, I think a lot of the cards for some of the better characters are going to do really, really well. Especially the inscribed autographs and things like that are going to do well. Now, I'm showing a couple of these because, again, as far as the design is concerned, it's really going to be up to you. I'm not going to say here whether someone should like it or not because that's really up to you. It's up to your personal preference. It's not my cup of tea, but at the same time, for some people, it may be interesting. But they did obviously try something with the Cactus Jack design here. So here's a Randy Orton just as an example of one of the inserts, and then looking at this Rhea Ripley. So here, kind of this example, obviously we're looking at one-of-ones and they're doing these mock-ups here, but just looking at this example here, the inscription is going to be a major thing because obviously if you're a Rhea Ripley collector, this would be a massive card. A one-of-one, obviously, but then on top of everything else with the inscriptions thrown in, that's going to be something a lot more attractive for somebody. So a card like this would go for probably crazy money. We're going to see what that ends up looking like once this product comes out. And again, starting off at such a high box price, and again, when we look at the breakdown here in a moment, you'll see kind of what I'm talking about. I think the singles will do very well. I think it's just going to be a question how that's going to break down once we get into it. So I'll click through a couple more here. Here's a Triple H insert. Stone Cold Steve Austin, again, this one would do really well. On-card auto and everything, I think is great. Again, design-wise, doesn't work for me, but at the same time, I understand. And if you are a Stone Cold Steve Austin fan, this isn't a bad card. I think it's interesting, if nothing else. Here's one for Penta. And then thematically appropriate, Miss Money in the Bank, and then former world champion. She had to relinquish the title since she's going to go off and have a child. So Naomi on there. But nonetheless, another interesting card again with a nice inscription. So it's one of those things where I could definitely see these ones being very sought after. Now from here, let's get right into it. I'm going to go over to the other tab here, and this is from Beckett. And like I said, I'll include a link in the description to this one for you because you can check out the breakdown, and it does have the checklists broken down, including the ability to download it for yourself. So you can basically go into it. A lot of it is straightforward. You've probably already seen 20 packs per box, 4 cards per pack. One of the things that isn't listed on here is that you do have parallels. It is a Chrome product after all, but it does indicate right here. It says the company has indicated there will be 16 parallels. We don't have the list, but you can just imagine from Topps Chrome, a lot of it will be different colors and a little bit with different patterns. Although with kind of this darker design, I don't know how some of them are going to come off. I think the one-of-one will come off fine with kind of the super fractal swirls and everything. I think that'll be fine. I just don't know how some of these other ones are going to come off as far as different inserts where usually we rely on a color, since you already have kind of the saturation and kind of this design aesthetic they're going for. So we'll see how some of them end up looking, but I could definitely see that being a chase for some folks who are trying to complete a rainbow. The inserts we showed a little bit there, Festival Fury and Rodeo Rebels, case hits like Trance Technicians and Kings of the Night. Interesting names, I'll just say that. We'll put it that way. But regardless, that's basically what you're looking at. 12 boxes per case, 4 cards per pack, 20 packs per box, 100 card set size. And that's what I'm going to focus on here next because here is the base set checklist. And again, like I said, I'll leave a link in the description so you can take a closer look at it. Really what I think is going to be interesting here, and actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the Excel spreadsheet because it actually shows off an extra column. It breaks it down by having the base cards and everything, but it also shows which brand they're on, including either a legend or an NXT talent. Now, what's going to be interesting about this checklist is they included a 100 card base card set, which is fine. It's, it's not too much. It's not too little. but then it does require certain choices as far as who's excluded as part of the checklist. And one of the ones that I thought was kind of an interesting one is actually somebody that I collect as kind of a secondary PC, which is JC Jane, who is actually the current NXT Women's Champion and TNA Knockouts Champion. So it's kind of interesting that she's excluded from this checklist, and all the other checklists as well. But at the same time, I think some of her stablemates are included in it. So quickly, I'll go over this checklist with you. Again, you see a lot of the usual suspects. John Cena, you got to have there. Rhea Ripley, no problem there. Trish Stratus is an example of a legend. You've got CM Punk, LA Knight, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to read through everybody. But I think the really standouts here is you've got Penta, you've got Ricky Saints. A couple of the newer folks are included in this checklist, as well as a lot of normal favorites. But I think the two kind of, standouts here are going to be that you do have Julie included in it. You will have Stephanie Verkeer, who doesn't have a lot of cards yet, so this is going to be another one for folks that are starting to collect her. But the kind of rookies that are included here is going to be Jordan Grace, which is listed as a rookie, and then as well as Zaria, who's also included as a rookie. So those are two that you're going to kind of want to pay attention to that are included in this that may not have had cards previously. I don't recall specifically, but they are listed as rookies on here. So this would be an option if you're looking at adding some additional cards. And right here is kind of talking about what I was referring to, is Jasmine Nix is included in here. And just above here, Fallon Henley. So 2 out of the 3 of that stable they've got going on is actually included, but not the leader and champion of the stable. So that's why I say 100-card checklist ends up with some interesting choices. Again, I have no problem with that. You can justify it in terms of looking at the checklist and seeing who you've got on here. Like, who would you remove in order to make that space? And there probably are a couple of choices. One thing, though, that is notable that I would probably mention to you is that because there is obviously a long time delay in getting these checklists out, you do end up with Gigi Dolan, who's not on the roster anymore, and somebody like Akora Jade, who's not on the roster anymore. So you can expect to see stuff like that. If somebody gets released, they're going to be included in this. Dakota Kai, I believe, was also released. So that's another example of somebody who is no longer on the roster, but is included as part of this checklist and maybe included in some of the other inserts. So it's just something to bear in mind as you look through it. Here are the Astro Knights, so you can see kind of the different people included in it. Again, they did include a reasonable amount of different people in there. So Carmen Petrovic, again, Nikita Lyons, even though I don't know how much stuff she's doing there. You've got a bit of a mix. You do have NXT talents in there. You do have legends. You do have current main roster people. And again, you do have a couple of folks that are carryovers from when they were still on the roster, because you've got Cora Jade here included in one of the inserts as well. So again, same example of the kind of thing I'm talking about. So you can kind of take a closer look at this, and it'll give you a bit of an idea. And depending on who you're collecting, you may be able to put together a different checklist of it. Again, we don't have a list of all the different parallels that are included, so there may be some parallels included with some of these inserts as well, but I don't know for sure. I can assume that is going to be the case since it is a Chrome product. But again, this is something you'll want to take a closer look at, and then we'll see as kind of the breaks happen. One last thing I'll mention about this is that obviously the breaks are going to be very interesting. I'll be checking it out with a lot of other folks. I'll be curious to see. Again, since there's no JC Jane on here, I'm not going to be collecting any of the singles. But if you are going to be collecting the singles, I think the breaks is going to be a good place to pay attention to. It's going to be interesting to see what ratios different parallels come out at, and how common the autographs do end up being. Because obviously that is one of the big chases, one of the big draws, especially the inscribed ones. So you're going to be, if you're looking out for that, you're going to want to see how many autographs are coming in, especially like through a case. So if you're going to participate in a case break, you're going to get a better sense of what your actual odds are to pull somebody. Because even if you got somebody who is included in all the checklists, that's going to help you, because you can probably get a base card, some parallels, and maybe include some of the inserts. But you may have a tougher chance to get some of the autographs and things like that if that's what you're looking for. So anyway, I'll just leave that as an example there. That's basically the Excel spreadsheet version of it. But again, you can see it here, and link in the description to all of this so you'll be able to take a closer look. Now, one more thing I wanted to look at, since it was released earlier today, is that included with Topps' Instagram page here. I'll include a link to the Instagram page so you can take a closer look at this. This is our first look at 2025 Topps Finest. So obviously I was just talking about Cactus Jack, because that's going to be the next one that's actually going to be released. But this is Topps Finest. This is a preview of something that the pre-order isn't going to happen until next week. So again, in the same vein, it'll be interesting to see what the price point is. So we got another chromium set, what that's going to look like, and we've actually got a couple of mock-ups here, so it'll give us a bit of a sense of what we should be looking for. So let's look at some of these. So here is one example of this. This is a 5 out of 5 Alexa Bliss on here. Kind of a graffiti theme kind of thing. Again, on-card autos, which is good. I'm not sure how I feel about this one. Personally, again, the aesthetic maybe isn't for me. But there are a couple, though, that I'll show you here in the next couple of slides that actually do kind of resemble old school Topps Finest, which I think could look pretty good. It's one of those things where you have to see it in hand to get the full sense of it, but it is interesting. Again, at least they're trying something different, which is fine. And a chromium set I think is going to do well and be popular, especially the parallels. But here's an example of the Alexa Bliss. Going forward here, again, here is an example of the Superfractor. Same kind of thing with more of that graffiti aesthetic. Again, if you're into that kind of thing. Here's more of a straightforward kind of Topps Finest design. Stone Cold Steve Austin on there again, on-card auto, which is going to be very popular, I have no doubt. And then here is a Chelsea green here with an inscription. So a superfractor with an inscription on there again. That's going to be very popular. Although I will say one kind of point I'll make about this now, and maybe we'll revisit it later, is that the inscription I think is a great idea. But the problem is if you start using the inscription all the time, it will lose its effect, just like everything else. You know, you kind of have to control when you're going to use it. It's a great feature to have because it's a great add-on. Having the on-card autos is great. Having the inscriptions is great. But you want to use it in such a way that it adds it and gives you a little extra, as opposed to just feeling like it's normal. Once it becomes too normal, then it's going to lose a little bit of that impact. But for now, it's still relatively new, so I think that'll work really well for a set like this. Going forward here, so this is Finest Masters. So if you're familiar with baseball and a lot of the other sports, Masters, so this is almost like the tiered themed sets, and you've got a couple different versions of it. I do like the double image on here with the whole Masters thing. So again, you'd have to see what these look like in hand, but I like the concept. And then including it with the autograph version of it, I like the idea. This is a little bit more my style in terms of what I'd want to see for this kind of thing with Topps Finest. Same kind of thing here. Now we've got a multi-autograph, so Superstar Rivalry signatures. I think that could be really interesting. You could have pretty good themes with that. Here again is the Finest Masters. Again, same kind of thing. You got the two images on there. You got the inscription. You got the autograph. I think these work. I think this actually works pretty well. Obviously, we're looking at a superfractor version, but I think even some of the other parallels on this would actually look pretty nice. Here is the Finest, which is another theme included in, again, perfectly fine. So this is the last one they include kind of in this preview. But I think if you've got a couple of different themed versions of the cards included in it with different autographs, inscriptions, and all that, I think you could do really, really well. So it's one of those things where I like the concept, and I'll have to see how it gets executed. But this looks like it's going to be the next set that they're going to be looking at after the Cactus Jack. So if you're not interested in the Cactus Jack, then they're going to be looking at Topps Finest, which I think will be more in line with kind of a regular kind of release. It'll be interesting to see what the configuration will be on that one. If it does include the autograph per box, how that's going to be broken down, what the pre-order price is going to be. So it does say pre-orders begin next week. So I will do kind of a follow-up once we know what the pre-order is. So like I said, Cactus Jack was $3.99. So we'll have to see what the pre-order looks like for Topps Finest WWE 2025. So now it looks like after all that long break, we got an AW release with metal. So that was, I think, pretty decent. I did open some boxes, and I liked what I saw out of that. And now we're going to have WWE actually getting the Cactus Jack release, which I think is still a little carryover from the old style. Again, the Cactus Jack thing never really worked for me, but fine if you want to release it that way. But then I think this Topps Finest here is the first real... We're getting another real release out there. In addition to Topps Chrome, now we're getting Finest out there. This is going to be a full-fledged kind of release with maybe some other stuff that would be a little bit more interesting. So just some thoughts from me. Curious to see what your thoughts are on this. I'll include a link to this one since it is the brand new one that we got the first look at. Curious if either one of those are of interest to you. And obviously, I'll include a link to the checklist so you can take a look at what the Cactus Jack has going for it, if there's something in there that you might be interested in. Again, more videos coming up on the channel. We'll talk about this stuff when it comes in. Whether I collect the cards or not, I'll usually discuss some of these, especially if I've got previews like this to take a closer look at. And I'll be curious, and we'll be sitting back and kind of watching some of the breaks when the Cactus Jack comes out, because it'll be interesting to see what those breaks end up looking like and what kind of feedback people have once they actually get a chance to participate in them. With that said, that's it for this one. Like if you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Thanks very much, and we'll catch you in the next one.